Hi, I'm your host, Jess Dewell, founder of Red Direction, and I am glad you are listening to the voice of Bold Business Radio for this program. We're talking about communication. We're talking about TMI. That's too much information. We're talking about the line between the two. And I have to tell you, you never know what you're going to get when you ask the question. And today was no different. The answers that I got shaped the discussion, and we went from finding the line of separating the two comes right back down to ourselves and the respect of ourselves. So whether we're talking about sharing versus taking over, whether we're talking about nonverbal communication, being able to use communication to make a decision, which is different than make communication to solve a problem, being transparent, having boundaries, this false idea of double standards, and in the end, what respect means and how we show up in the world is what matters. So before we hear from them, I would like to introduce each of our panelists to you. First is Dr. Federico Fioretto. He is an entrepreneur, trainer, and coach who is passionate about sustainability and the development of human potential. He provides a method to transform all conflicts through hands-on, practical, practicable concepts. Nora Richardson is recognized by the New York Times. She is a branding strategist and a believer that every business can be successful when they choose to understand how branding can transform their company from ordinary to extraordinary. We'll be right back after this.
Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business, the show that provides everything smart leaders need to evaluate situations, build relationships, and create solutions. Jessica Dewell candidly talks about the skills necessary to build tenacity and do more with less. And now, here's Jessica.
Federico, I want to know, when does communication change from being useful to too much information, and how do we find the line that separates the two?
Oh, it's two questions in one. But I will start with saying what is communication and what is the purpose of communication. So we have to go back to the meaning of the word, which, by the way, is a Latin word, and it means doing something together. So it's accomplishing a mission. And so when you communicate with someone, you have a purpose and you have an objective. So now, in order to get an objective, you have to be efficient and effective. So I would say, starting to answer your question, that communication, when it becomes redundant and when in the interchange of information and knowledge, there is too much and there is something that is not strictly connected to what you are trying to achieve together with the other person, then you kind of go through the threshold and you get into too much information. And every information we receive, we need to process it and we need to make out if it is useful or if it is redundant. So I'd rather stick to the minimum and then maybe ask questions if one of the parties needs more information, starting with the basics. And the less information, the less time we consume, so we can be more efficient. But this is just for starters. Most likely there will be much more from Nora and from our discussion.
Look at that. He's practicing what he was even using within his answer. Less is more from the very beginning.
Walk the talk.
Nora.
Yes.
When does communication change from useful to too much information, and how do we find the line that separates the two?
Well, I think that what Federico said was absolutely perfect in the origin. It is about sharing. And when you're actually sharing information, not talking over somebody or trying to prove a point, when you're actually communicating and for the act of sharing information, then I don't think that is too much information as long as both people are in the conversation. They're both sharing information. I think that women actually have a higher threshold of absorbing more information than men. I think men are very much, like Federico said, he wants less, communication. He wants less information, and then he wants to clarify it with questions, ask clarifying questions. And a woman wants to actually see from start to finish the whole plan, the whole big picture, the story from the start, the middle, and the end. And to another woman, that is absolutely fantastic because she's following the communication in her head and she's coming up with all the wonderful pictures. But a man, that is absolutely too much. He wants the facts, the most important things, and that's it. And he wants to actually ask you the questions for the important things that he finds important.
Oh, talk about some juicy stuff. Okay, hold on. I got to write a few things down here. Priorities, and I'm just going to write the word juicy. All right. So there are two approaches that we have seen, both starting from a starting point of a need to have an interaction of some kind, or a decision that an interaction is required, and at which point in time that is, what is presented and how it is presented is very subjective. And we've heard two amazing answers for this. Where I'd like to start is, I'd like to start with something from a totally different show that came to mind as I was listening to you both talk, and in my head, holding the juxtapositions. And this goes to a way of being. Some people, when they're looking to be inclusive and they are looking to make sure people know that they're being tracked, will nod. Okay. Yes, I follow along. Yes, I get what you're saying. Yes, I get what you're saying. When talking with somebody who is sharing the information that needs to be shared, to have a decision made takes that nod as decision made, yes, and they move on. And so, isn't this interesting? And so, in general, in the conversation I was having, this was with Steve Rohr, he was talking about it being a feminine trait, the nodding, a masculine trait, nodding for decision being made. And as soon as he said this, I was like, I don't know, there's going to be a gray area like with everything. There are going to be men that are wanting to nod and say, yes, we're tracking, just as much as there are women who are like, oh, good, you're nodding, we can move on. So in general, when we're talking about this, these traits, these masculine, feminine traits, they're true. And when Steve was telling me this, I went, holy crap. Do you know how many fights I could have avoided in my marriage? Do you know how many conversations were frustratingly hard to restart because they were perceived as being restarting and talking about something that had already been decided, when in fact, there was a miscommunication from our nonverbal communication. And so that's, I think, where I want to start. The importance of our nonverbal communication in all of this concept of showing up, because what I heard you both say was showing up. What are your top tips from both of your perspectives and experiences that you can share with us about how to keep in mind and be aware of nonverbal communication, even though we might be wrong, since it's all subjective anyway?
All right. How many questions? Starting with the nonverbal, there is quite a lot of science about that. For as much as it is difficult to give a percentage, but we know that more than 60% of our communication passes through the nonverbal signs. So it's very important. What is really interesting is that we are equipped to get the nonverbal. So we have the mirror neurons in our brain, and they are the technology that we have built in order to get the nonverbal. So in a way, I wouldn't give too much attention trying to rationalize the nonverbal, because we are very well equipped to get it in an irrational, unconscious way. To me, there are some more practical and easy to practice tricks that help to avoid misunderstandings and all that kind of stuff that you are talking about. But first, there is one thing to keep in mind, which is very important, and that Nora was hinting in a way when she talked about sharing. Communication is not transmission. So it's not just giving out a lot of information and submerging and kind of drowning the other person. We are talking a conversation between two people, not drowning the other person into your information. So we have to keep in mind that we have to be both. There has to be space for both of us. And one simple trick is called chunk and check. When you share information with someone, and it's just sharing the information, especially if you have decisions to make together, and it's important that the other person is every time on board. You give just small chunks, and then you check what the other person has got. And this is very important. Just having, asking simple question and maybe putting it on yourself, like, I just want to know if I explain myself well, not to hint that the other person is stupid and cannot understand you.
Right.
And this is a very, very practical trick that it can work marvelous. And the other is, nodding, or that kind of non-verbal but in sometimes intentional way. It's very cultural. So it depends. In some cultures, people will nod and will also say yes, even if they mean no. So it's very important to check every time what the person is really meaning. So nodding can be a signal of attention, or the fact that the person is listening to you, kind of encouraging. And we can also nod to encourage the other person to talk. But I wouldn't give too much importance to the fact that a person nod, and certainly not take it for granted that it is a yes, I agree with you.
Yeah. What would you add to that, Nora?
So basically, I would add that in my business, I rely on people communicating their goals, their dreams, their the bigger pictures of what they're trying to do with their lives. And sometimes what happens is they communicate language that they think they're using accurately, and then it's my job to actually pinpoint whether or not they're using the words right or wrong. So clarifying questions is absolutely key, but reiterating what I heard them say is absolutely the key to making sure everybody's on the exact same page at the same time. So reiterating what Federico said, kind of thing, making sure that I understood what he was saying, and then he can say, no, you didn't get it right. You actually got this not quite in the right place or the right meaning, and therefore we can clarify that and move on and get to that nod of, yes, everybody's understanding everything. So clarifying questions is absolutely key, and then reiterating what you've heard to make sure that everybody is on the same page.
Yeah, I subscribe to that.
And now we're talking about building that shared meaning. Absolutely. And to have shared meaning, we have to have some sort of experience that brings us together. And what I learned right before we started recording this show for airing was that one of the things that I do as part of Voice of Bold Business for panel discussions is send everything out with links to all of the panelists so that everybody has an idea, especially if they've never met, who they will be on with, what they do, and have the opportunity to do a little bit of research, provided they would like to. And in this particular case, I do believe it might be the first time, maybe the second time, if Federico was the instigator here. And that is to actually reach out and have a conversation and learn about each other through a conversation before you ever appear on the show. So when I heard you guys talking about that you not only had met via email, but that you had had some sort of a conversation beyond just that, hello, I can't wait to be on a panel with you, is great, because it adds so much value and context to better understand the person you're going to show up and spend time and be in the same space with. And that makes me think about this concept of open communication to make a decision, which is different than problem solving. So we're going to stick with the make a decision today. And how do you, in communication, where are the boundaries that we need to set that everybody can agree to be able to show up fully, recognize there might be awkwardness, a need for vulnerability, and that we don't always have the answers, even though we're all coming together to make this decision?
Well, I would say that almost everything in communication issues is about being into the communication. So it's very much an attitude. So if we are talking about decision making, discussions, and communication within an organization, let's say in a team, in a business, for instance, it is very important that there is a culture of safe environment, so that place where as much as possible we know that we are not judgmental in our interaction, and there is a real interest in people and in what they have to say. So listening is not just hearing. Listening is really being curious to know, and having an attitude that you really believe that everyone can contribute to the decision. So if you don't believe that deep within yourself, there are no tricks that you can play. It has to be real. And that's the fascinating thing about communication, that if it's not real, it shows immediately, because we have lie detectors very well built in.
We do. And even if I can't see you guys, right? Let's say we were just on a phone call or typing by email. I know, even in an email, I know if I have somebody's full attention or not.
It's true, although the more communication is technologically mediated, the more you lose, because the 60% nonverbal data and information that we exchange are somehow kept partially in a telephone conversation, and when we get to emails, much more is lost. And when you talk about text messages that very often are made in a hurry with little attention to the choice of words that you make, or how much work and conflict there is to do that.
True.
So that's good for business, but not for human relations. I mean, for business, because I work in conflict transformation too, not because it's good in businesses.
Well, businesses would say it's more efficient. Just use the least amount of words possible. Let's get to this number of things that we've got to do. And so when you say there's more to it and there's this human element also, I completely agree. And we're swinging back. We went to the how much can we do and how much can we track? And we're bringing back in how much value is also there when we take the numbers and we put the gooey awesomeness of humanness in the middle of it.
Yeah, and I just steal a few more seconds, but
yes,
let's be clear. There is no efficiency in using little words or few words, thinking that you are communicating effectively, because then you have to go back 25 times after that in order to transform the conflict that has arisen from miscommunication. So not efficient at all.
Yes. Nora, what would you add so far to what we've been talking about with this one?
Well, I must say, tone is what resonates with me. So you can have a tone in your voice that you can actually, visually see somebody saying something and hear the inflections and what have you, and that's tone. And then when you're on a phone, you can hear the inflections and what is being said and how it's being said or implied. But words on paper also have tone, right? And so therefore you have to watch out in communication, in a text, in an email, because the inflection, even though it is unintentional, if you don't pay attention, can totally be misread. And it wasn't exactly the words that were said, but it was how the words were placed. And that equals tone. Very important.
Are you telling me all those texts that I get from people that make me feel little and silly and unknowledgeable and drain away my confidence?
Yes.
Those people are actually doing it?
Well, I'm saying that there are some that are, and that some are just miscommunication.
Just because they're oblivious.
They're oblivious.
Yeah.
They were doing two things at one time. They shot down some wonderful words. They said, "Get it done," and you were like, "But you didn't say thank you, or you didn't, say please. You just said get it done." And the person who receives that, whatever their mood is at the time, they can totally change the tone. So remember, it's not just the tone that you give. It's also the one that's being received. That is a huge thing. And both, if they're not on the same mental wavelength, then what happens is whatever day that they're having, good or bad, can influence the tone of what they read.
We're talking about the skill of compartmentalization, which is a bit of a boundary, but is compartmentalizing actually a skill? I mean, we're talking about it like it's one.
I think it's more than compartmentalization. It's a very difficult word for me.
Okay.
I think it's more the capacity to be present where you are. But it might look mostly the same, but it's really the basis of a good communication. It's the basis of doing anything quite well, being present in what you do. And that's something which is very often missing in communication today, especially since we are almost often connected with 2 or 3 other places or 2 or 3 other persons. But there's no better advice that we can give to people who want to effectively communicate and never get into the too much information than just switch off from the rest of the world and be present in the communication that you're having now, because you will be efficient and effective in
How do you do that? Because I'm listening to you and I'm like, I can barely compartmentalize and go, I got all this stuff and maybe I've got 10 things, but I know for 15 or 20 minutes or 2 hours, I can set it over here and it's going to be looking at me, right? Like a puppy dog waiting to get its dinner. And they know that you are preparing that dinner and it's just waiting for you, but you're able to and this is why I use the word compartmentalize, because if I know it's there and I know it's looking at me, I still have the ability to set it aside enough, maybe create a personal boundary so that I can be here and be as, I can be as present as I can be, because none of that matters. There's nothing I can do about it, because right now the interaction is this right here. And I think that's a discipline. And in addition to a discipline, do you have ideas for how people can practice this presence that you're describing? Because I know I personally struggle with that. I'm like, yeah, it's all still right here. I'm just hoping you can't see it.
Well, I think you should have Eckhart Tolle for another Voice of Bold Business talking about presence.
Yeah.
He's much better than me because he really lives that. I just know the theory and struggle with the practice every day.
Well, I think go ahead. Sorry.
No, just to finish, I think we have to be honest. If we try to be everywhere at the same time, it's not real. We're just lying to ourselves and doing things badly, so it does not work. We have to be sincere.
And that's exactly what I was going to chime in with. I've been married for 20 years, and communication is key in that kind of situation. And sometimes you just have to be honest and transparent in where you are at that moment in time. When my husband comes in and asks me a question, or he wants something of me to do something, I have to be quite honest with him and say, hi, I'm having not a very good day right now. And so what you tell me right now is going to potentially be heard with different ears than normal. So pick your words nicely and kindly, kind of thing. And I will respond the best I possibly can in my current state. And I am going to apologize beforehand if anything comes off as harsh, right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, in business, you can't necessarily go into all of that with you're with your partner, but you can say, "Hi, Sally. It's been a day. So what can I help you with?" And be done with it. So you've sort of kind of prefaced it like, "Okay, give me what you got, but I am already at my limit. So I might not be nearly as good at getting to you as I normally would."
So let's talk about boundaries in both of your scenarios of whether of sharing and how to be present and just being transparent and communicative in the effort to connect around something in the moment with this other person that wants to connect with us and share with us, or that we want to connect and share with. Knowing ourselves and being able to have that boundary, like Nora, you were just describing in that example, how do we start? Let's say we feel that people are walking all over us, or we walk into a meeting and we're the leader, but it doesn't matter what we say, it doesn't have any clout. Okay, both of those are indications that maybe credibility is a factor. We're going to leave that aside for a minute. And we're talking about the authority that we mean what we say when we say what we mean. And so how do we get better at that? So the boundaries don't feel like you're in, you're out, you're good, you're bad, which we get into some judgmentalness, but here are our rules of engagement in this moment.
I have 3 keywords. One was hinted certainly from Nora, or at least she suggested in a way, which is awareness. Because when she said, "It's been a day, so please be careful how you deal with me." Do your best. I will do my best. It takes a lot of awareness. So the first thing should be we have to learn to listen to ourselves. And most of the time, especially if we are in a leadership position in our team, we can make some choices. So if we feel bad one day, we feel we are nervous, maybe we know it's not the time to enter into a very delicate issue, and we just postpone it to day after. Or we know at least that we are very much easy to trigger, and we are very, very careful. The second word is responsibility. We take responsibility of our reactions. Since communication is a two-way thing, and again, I regret we don't have a video show, but next step in your career, I'm sure you will have a video show and I will do something visual there. So something is sent to the other part, and the other part is receiving that. And again, Nora was saying something of this kind. So when you say, I have messages that make me feel like that, no, messages are sent in a way, and then you receive them, and you can feel or not in some way, and that's your responsibility. So if they make you feel that, it means that you are vulnerable to some kind of message, but it's not the responsibility of the other person.
Love that you say that. Yes.
That's very important. And the third, we are talking about setting boundaries and people feel comfortable with those boundaries and having authority, etc. Another key word is consistency. So we have to walk the talk. People have to know that they can rely on us. We are trustworthy, and we do what we say. And that's very important, to be respected, and that the rules of the game are respected by everybody. And especially if the leader walks the talk and respects the rule that he or she sets, that gives a lot of confidence to the people.
All right. So from that, I want to hear what you have to add, Nora, before I jump in, because my wheels in my brain are turning. That should be a song.
Well, I must say, I totally agree with Federico on all 3 points. That's absolutely amazing how he synthesized all of that. I think that responsibility, taking responsibility for your actions and reactions is absolutely key in communication. A lot of things nowadays, people just, as Federico said, transmit information, and they're not communicating. And they're not taking responsibility for their actions or reactions. Some of them are being very consistent in being irresponsible, and they're just not aware. So those 3 things were absolutely amazing and fantastic. The other thing is taking leadership of yourself. Basically, if someone has in a setting of a work setting, like a meeting, and you notice one of your peers or leaders rolling his eyes or something of that nature, being kind of condescending to whatever you were saying, you can always pull them aside afterwards and just say, "Hey, I saw that you kind of did an eye roll kind of thing. And I just wanted to make sure I understood exactly what that was for." So you are taking action is key to actually not perpetuate the miscommunication, because he or she may have eye roll because they didn't actually understand the fine points of what you were trying to make. And this is a clear ability to stand up for yourself, make sure that you are communicating well, and that they have a wonderful chance to voice their opinions of what you said and how they may or may not agree with you in a respectful way.
Okay, and I'm gonna add another one there too, because what I was doing, I'm like searching around. You may have seen watching me here. I was looking for my phone. And it's funny because when we do these shows, my phone is in airplane mode. It is off, and it's usually out of the room. And I was like, you know what that eye roll could have been in that meeting? It could have been the phone sitting face up next to the notes and the cup of coffee or the water. And it was something absurd, and it had nothing to do with the meeting. Yet everybody in the meeting saw it. Yet it impacted the way that people talk to each other after that eye roll occurs. And what you were talking about pulling them aside and saying, "Hey, we've got to talk about this," is keeping the place, those rules of engagement of, look, you know what, to have non-judgment, eye rolling falls into that category. So here we go. And that's, of course, if you define it that way. And I'm only using it as maybe the eye roll is not an acceptable means of communication in that scenario. Maybe in some places it is. I don't know. If it is, you guys got to talk to Federico and me and Nora.
I definitely think it's disrespectful. I at least
yes, it is. I think it's, and every time I've ever seen it, it is also very disrespectful. So let's talk about this. Okay, so this concept of a double standard. Okay, so And I'm going to use, you brought in your relationship, and this is the easiest way for me to describe, because when we are working with colleagues and when we're working with friends and when we're out in the world and with some role on outside of our family, we have a level of politeness that we don't keep at home. That we don't keep at home. And so I'm going to use this example because I think it allows people to recognize that if we did allow this authenticity to come through in the places we work and show up in the way that I'm going to describe, we could fix a lot of communication and not only deepen things, allow less to be said and more to be done, because we get the inner workings of people and we have that shared meaning that you guys have been talking about building all the way through the show so far. Here's the example. So I always am interruptible. I'm always approachable. When you need something, you can come to me. So when I'm at home and I'm working and my husband is at home and he's working, or maybe it's a Saturday and I'm working and he's doing something out in the yard, or I'm doing housework and he's doing some work and runs into a problem and wants a second opinion. Okay. Regardless, all of a sudden, hey, Jess, I've got to do this thing. I need this thing. And I'm like, okay. And I immediately stop what I'm doing and I put all of my attention on that. So I've taken the energy and the time to stop, shift, move. All my attention and presence is over there. So this happens on a regular basis. Well, when he's working and he's decided he's interruptible, but not really. You know those? Yes, I'm not really interruptible all the time. He will say to me, you know what? I just can't talk to you right now about that. Okay. And it's harsh and it's clear and it's just like that. I just can't talk to you about that right now. Okay. So at first, right, we've been married a long time too. So a long time ago, that was hard to hear. And I got frustrated and I'm like, it's not reciprocated. So I felt that there was a double standard. Turned out it was not. It was more about what you guys have been talking about in terms of the leadership and taking action. I never did anything about it. It's also this concept of my responsibility to have said, hey, I'm responding to this. Maybe be curious about the reason why, because I'm not even responding, I'm reacting. And it's my responsibility and I get to choose to respond or to react. And I'm reacting. So I was like, you know what? Maybe I need to practice this thing. So I got really good at it. That's not a problem. I'm like, sure, later, that's fine. I get it. Now I'm like, oh, I really am not interruptible all the time and I need to change this. Well, changing a habit is really hard. And so here we are. And I make it sound like this happens all the time, and it does not, but so it takes a little bit longer, because the more you practice a habit, the better you get. I am really good at telling people, oh, okay, can I call you back in 15 minutes? Can you please wait? I will come to your office in 5 minutes. Let me just finish this thought. Have a seat. I've got to finish typing this sentence so I can keep it in my mind. And everybody is super okay with that. When I turn around and I use any one of those sentences on Ryan, he turns around and he goes, he makes a face and he goes, come on now, that wasn't such a big ask. And I looked at him and I said, no, it wasn't. In fact, I just have to finish my thought. And so here was this thing. I have changed my reaction to a response based off of something I need to do to have more leadership. And it takes a long time to learn. And it hurts sometimes. And I'm like, whoa, where did that reaction come from? And then I'm like, oh, I used to be like that. So there's this reflection that comes back up too, isn't there? It's like this whole big circle of, I can learn from a master and I can be better at what I want to be at, yet there's going to be a change in place because somebody else, the other person, has to also then go through the reaction, choose to respond to get to that deeper meaning. Now that we're through it, for the most part, it's super easy. And that means if it's urgent or it's really quick, we've figured out, here's how we work it in really quick without distracting people, without distracting us from whatever we were doing, right? Whoever is uninterruptible. And we don't take the time in our politeness to do that with team members. So here I am describing a wart story, maybe even a hard thing to think about in terms of a personal relationship, and that we don't even take the time all the time to do that in our workplaces with our employees, with our partners, things like that. And so I would like to know, do you guys have an experience like that, either at home or at work? And, what did you take away from it? And have you figured out a way to bring that authenticity of that voice that you found in that situation out to the world even more?
Again, it's about awareness, because why are you so, or have you been so interruptible? What did you fear if you answered, I cannot right now, I'll be there in 15 minutes because I have something to finish? I sometimes do teach leadership with the help of horses, and it's amazing to see how the interaction of a pack of horses and how humans interact with the horse. And what I have learned is a wonderful law of life in the pack, and human beings are a pack in a way. It's the basic rule of the game is who moves whom. So when you're busy with something and someone is calling you for a second opinion, and you immediately react and move away from your task and answer immediately to that call, that person is moving you. And that means that that person is your leader in that moment, all right? So leadership is about not being moved and moving the others, even if for wonderful purpose, for the good of everybody. So that's the leader. And in a pack of horses, it's very clear. And humans can learn a lot from horses. So who moves whom? You have to learn how to not be moved by others, and always act and never react. Then it has to be practiced and has to become a habit. I know it takes time, but horses sometimes do kick you, as it has happened to me too, and that kind of quickens the process of learning, I think.
And if it's not a horse, it might be some sort of cosmic 2x4. Like, I remember the moment in time when I did just that. I was like, and it was, hey, I don't have to stop this instant. And again, this was a long time ago, so I'm sharing something that I went through and I learned, and it was something useful that I took out into the rest of the world. And you're absolutely right. It's a game changer. Yeah. What would you add, Nora?
So, Jess, you're my husband and I'm your husband. And in that scenario,
so you've been there too, huh?
But I'm the other person. I'm the one that's moving my husband and expecting him to move quickly. And then I don't reciprocate nearly as often. And it's not actually because I'm acting or reacting in the sense of, usually when that happens, and he has had to understand that I am very focused when I'm doing my work. And he will come in to my office and immediately start trying to communicate with me. So he's like right there, just like saying all this stuff. And to me, Federico, I don't know if you know the Peanuts cartoon with Snoopy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So remember when Charlie Brown's teacher goes, wah, 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 wah. Yeah, right? Well, that's exactly what Michael sounds like when he's talking to me. And I'm looking at him, and I've got a glazed face. Now, after 20 years of marriage, you'd think he'd understand that I am not hearing him. I'm hearing wah, 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 wah. And so until he asks a question, and then it's for whatever reason, that wonderful question, rise at the end of a sentence when it's a question.
Yeah.
It clues me in like this, like, I now have to respond. I don't know what he said. What did he ask? How do I actually replay that in my head? Did I really hear it? Did I not really hear it? And then I have to just own up and say, I didn't hear you. What did you want me to answer? And up until that point, I am not in it. I'm not in the moment. And so my reaction is to look at him and stare at him and hope that he goes away so that I can actually get back to what am I doing. And then I'm doing my thing. I'm not hearing him, you know?
Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting?
So that is so when you were talking about your story, that's what came up with me. I'm like, well, you know, I can't pull myself out because I'm so focused to act or react. I look like I'm acting or reacting, but I'm not even there.
For a minute, because here's how I did it. Okay. I want to act. I want to be respectful. I want to be available. I want to be approachable.
Right.
With my team, with my family, it doesn't matter. I have this sign says in session, welcome, please come in. Now, even before my son didn't know how to read, he knows white means stay out. Black means come on in. So these are the types of things, even though it's little, and it doesn't matter, I will use this tool because it clues everybody in that I've decided to be in a zone, and that the only way I'm going to get interrupted at my office, at my home, everywhere is specifically related to a clue that I have helped other people recognize, so I don't accidentally make them Charlie Brown's teacher. Finally, I felt so bad from that. And I did it to everybody. I did it to my husband. I did it to my son. I did it to my colleagues. I did it to my clients. And I was like, oh, wait, hang on. This is not good. This is not good. This is room for improvement. And this actually helps me. I have a physical thing that I'm tactile. I'm a tactile learner, that it even tells me, oh, look, okay, I am saying come in whenever you want. I am saying stay out.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. Yeah.
Taking responsibility and sharing an information, which is important. And people might just be thinking to their things that they want to talk to you and they just don't mind. But if they have a clear information, they are willing to respect you. So It's very interesting. Sometimes we make things more complicated than they are. Sometimes it's just
sometimes, isn't it all the time?
Well, we are improving, you know.
Yeah. I hear you.
I think that it's amazing and it's great. And what you've done right there is not only have you been respectful to everyone else, but you also, with that, brilliant, I'm going to do it. I'm going to totally do it. You have brought in awareness of yourself, self-awareness on how you act and react, and you are respecting yourself and the time of when you are in those zones. So yeah, absolutely. That's pretty rock on.
Everywhere. I have 4 of them.
Four of us.
I have one in my bag that goes with me everywhere.
That's awesome. Oh, that's really great.
Send one.
You need one?
Or if it's not copyrighted.
I don't think it is.
Nora has mentioned a very important word, which is respect, which is very important when we are talking communication, and also self-respect. And I am doubtful that the person who does not respect him or herself is really able to respect others, because he or she will always be reacting here and there and not really being present and fully in possession of him or herself. So respect in both directions. It's like love. You cannot love others if you don't love yourself.
Okay, we have to pause right there. And I want to go into this a little bit deeper, because you bring up such a really good point. So all of these people in the world that are, and I am a recovering one of these, I will honestly say I have to proactively practice not being this way, of being of service all the time to my detriment. I would give people the shirt off my back if it was the last shirt I had. And I would rather run around naked than let somebody else run around naked and be cold. And you know, that's a problem. That is a big problem. And I have to tell you, there is a kind of a rock bottom that you hit with that. And I hit that in the last few years. And hitting it and recognizing it and really being able to embrace it and say, no, I need this shirt first. And it's only with me having my shirt, do I have what I need to go do something else. And then together, I am uplifting myself and I can bring other people with me.
Exactly.
I think you bring that that point home. And people who are out there there's got to be a better word for it, but the people who are the martyrs. I'll do anything no matter what. You can call me any time of day, and I'm going to complain about it a lot, but I'm going to get it done because you called me, and I have this responsibility to everybody else except myself, which is actually, you're right. It's a very clear line. It's like, actually, no, they feel obligated. They feel some sense of duty. There's something that they're trying to fulfill in themselves that is always going to be a hole that leaks love and energy right out of them until they fix it.
We are like cups, and we have to fill our cup if we want to give to someone something to drink. Otherwise, it's just a delusion. We are just trying to soothe the thirst of others with an empty cup. And I've seen so many people in this situation, very often mothers, for instance, that are always there and available for everybody until the point they are exhausted and they are overwhelmed by rage and anger because they don't respect themselves. So at the point they think they serve others, but in a way they are just sharing the bitterness because they don't respect themselves. And it happens everywhere. And so that's so important.
I'm going to bring back this double standard then here, because really if I were to take everything that the two of you have shared, the insights and the wisdom, if somebody's listening and they're like, yeah, there are double standards everywhere. Well, maybe that's a clue that there's a reaction happening instead of a response, that we're sharing an empty cup with the hopes that nobody else notices that cup is empty when we're offering them something to drink. It's what I hear you guys saying if I were to sum that up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we have a lot of self-work. So a self-limitation then, a double standard could be a hidden self-limitation.
It's not so clear to me because I don't see double standards. I just see awareness and unawareness, self-respect or not self-respect. Is that what you call a double standard?
A double standard is when I do something and it's not okay, but you do the exact same thing and it is okay. So it's a perspective.
Right. But then I wouldn't recommend double standards. And that again, that has to do with respect.
Yes.
The respect you give to others has to be the same respect that you give to yourself. And you demand that respect. And if you don't get that respect, you don't play the game. So there is just one standard, and that standard is respect and sharing and achieving objectives together, or playing another game, or change your team.
And I think that it's all on you as a person. You can only change yourself. You can't change anybody else. You can only change yourself, and in hopes that you are leading other people to change themselves. So you act and react in the way that you want others to act and react to you. So it's about changing yourself first, being aware of who you are, how you act, how you react, what your triggers are, and then you basically change those things. And then everybody else will either fall in place or not. And the ones that fall in place stay, and the ones that don't, you either have to work with them and figure it out, or if they are a part of your private life, then you can say, thank you very much. You've been a great person up until, now, and we'll have limited interactions, until you respect yourself as much as you respect other people. So
many times in my years of training and coaching, I've seen people who felt that it was so difficult, for instance, to say a no, or to demand that one of their requests was, granted. And until they took the training and I gave them the homework of saying that no, and they came back the next time and they said, you know what, I did say that no. And what happened? Oh, nothing. The person just said, okay. And everything went smooth. So we just have to take responsibility of our action, of ourselves. And we have evoked Tola before. I can evoke Mahatma Gandhi, who famously said, be the change you want to see in the world. And if we change, the environment in which we live changes, maybe not dramatically in one day, but when we change our responsibility of ourselves and our leadership of ourselves, everyone around us feels the change and something starts to change, and we change the world step by step.
Can you believe it? I mean, hello, respect yourself, respect others, respect, respect, respect. There's a song about that, RESPECT. And there's more to it, but that's all you get. So go look it up online if you would like to hear the whole song. And in fact, I'll include it in the program notes. Okay, all of the program notes will be at voiceofboldbusiness.com/P102. That is voiceofboldbusiness.com/P for program number 102. You can also search Crossing the Line into TMI. You've listened, you've heard the wisdom and the experience of both Nora and Federico, and I want you to know you're rating this program and subscribing to future Voice of Bold Business Radio programs will give you more programs of this quality and caliber. It will also allow you to stay in touch and get to know some people and their stories, and know that if you like them on the show, reach out to them across social media because they are there. By the way, Voice of Bold Business Radio does have all the contact information that we have for them on the website. So go to the program notes, click on their name, see where you can find them. Your experience and beliefs, like what the definition of respect is and how it shows up, defines what it means to be a leader today. Decision-making includes rethinking our thinking. And what we learned today about crossing the line into TMI, about communication, is that we must be constantly thinking about how we communicate. It's bold to be a business leader today and take the time to think about and be present and responsible for our actions. You can know with practice when you are crossing the line into too much information.
Subscribe at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com and get more information, program notes, and past episodes. Bold leaders approach each situation and focus on action to achieve a higher level of leadership. Jess Dewell, your business advocate, is the host of the Voice of Bold Business Radio. Thank you for joining us.